controllers of protection, the mafia. You want to be protected? You got to pay up. You got to join our war when we tell you to join our war.
25% of Christians, that's like almost more than 25 million people, man. That's a lot. It's only 8 million Jews live in America, and you barely have like 8 million live inside Israel. So you can imagine there's a lot of hatred towards the Jews. And you know what? It's thanks to Netanyahu and people like you and a lot of people that hate Muslims. Muslim. Why do you have problem with Muslims? Literally, the Jews and Muslims and Christians, they lived on that piece of land. They coexisted with each other. After the white papers, it was only the Jewish side that fucking did the terrorist attacks against British mandate. You forgot about that, right? After the white papers, it was only the fucking Jewish side that attacked British mandate. It wasn't the Arabs. There were skirmishes prior to 1999. After the white papers were issued, it was only the Jews. I said after 1939. Do you know the year of the do you know the Arab revolt that happened from 1936 to 1939? Yes. Okay, I'm talking about after the white papers. In 1939, the white papers were issued. So the Arabs they went on silent mode. And you know who started doing attacks, terrorist attacks? You see, there's a lot. No, they did not kill them. The Arabs were still there on the land. Of course, there were Arabs on the land, but they killed many of the important Arab leadership. I seriously can't believe. I did acknowledge there were skirmishes prior to 1939, before the white papers. But after 1939, it was only the Jews that were doing attacks. And I just don't get it. Why the hell? What was the need to create a Jewish state? You couldn't coexist with the Muslims, with the Christians. I don't get it, man. Like, what was the fucking need to create and establish a state? Because we don't have any state in the world. So one. Oh my God, you don't need a fucking state. You could coexist with anybody. I live on a fucking house. I live in a house. Partition plan that happened in fucking 1947 as well.
Negrophobia or colorphobia is a discriminatory step. Have I ever sided with the Pharisees?
I'm telling you, you will
Have I ever?
But there's like people, so you have like cluster B personality disorders, and so it's pretty common. So somebody with like antisocial personality disorder almost always strong traits, or in addition has narcissistic personality disorder. You do get people that, and of course people with borderline personality disorder can have a lot of narcissistic traits. So you can have a lot of the shit, and the other source, narcissistic, antisocial, borderline, what was the other one? Histrionic. Histrionic. one diagnosis, I would doubt even 1 in 5. Access 2, which will probably be, a minority of people. But I will say, you can, just observing people on here, I can tell the personality disorder shit. You can kind of tell who likely has what.
Oh my gosh. I wouldn't want to embarrass anybody, but man, it'd be fun to know what you were thinking each person was,
Well, there is one thing. Almost all of the people that were had big rooms and were personalities. Narcissistic traits, to me, they were very glaring for many of them. And with me, you could even say that I have bits of those traits myself. But I could see it really strongly with many of the people on here. And in a way, it takes a narcissistic person that would drive somebody to want to be a clout chaser or a personality. And you do also have this Machiavellian way of operating to undercut people that you're competing with on here for attention, basically. And they absolutely did that.
No. You
But
work
the
in
superficial charm
mental.
should always be your number one red flag with people. That's what almost all of them have. When you hear people
Say that
talk
again?
about superficial charm. I volunteer this, I do that. When they bring it up casually, I spent the weekend feeding the Senate. They're not. That's them bragging and trying to elicit praise from you. That's not something normal people ever volunteer. A God-fearing normal person doesn't tell you about it. These people, though, that confuses a lot of people because they use that mask to lure people in. And
what are you talking about? Pepe, what's your point? Pepe, what's your point, Pepe? What's your point?
No, I'm talking about the people that are narcissists and sociopathic on this app.
You said interesting. Go away. I don't like it. I like this. I like talking about this. Do you work in mental health, Pepe?
No, I didn't. I'm
My
older.
gosh.
Are you 40 years old, Pepe?
Sunday. Chill.
How fucking old are you?
Motherfucker, how old are you?
Oh my gosh. I just want
Now
to
we're talking about how clusters can be personality disorders. Do you have anything to contribute to that?
What's your disorder? What's your disorder?
My disorder?
Right now it's that he's drinking.
Probably that I'm not drinking, I think, because you guys sound drunk.
I'm drunk and I'm horny.
Oh, Jesus fucking Christ.
I'm retarded and dead.
He's another one that had a lot of those traits, but he didn't come off as fake. He's very blunt and how it works. also has zero problems doing it, and he will, and then he'll go on his tirade about our monetary system and all of that stuff.
So what do you have?
Whatever.
Oh
Right.
God.
Not just the monetary system, Pepe. Come on, give me one more.
The Jews,
No,
the
bullshit,
bakers.
bullshit.
Retribution! Retribution!
Immigration, Pepe.
Okay,
Immigration,
immigration.
damn it.
And his social personality.
That's fair.
Retribution!
Pervasive patterns of disregard for violation of the rights of others.
I
Yeah.
don't really know.
Who wants to get my diagnosis?
Privation and disregard for and violation of the rights of
I'm
others.
solely out here advocating for the government to
These
be
features include deceitfulness, impulsivity, irritability, aggressiveness, reckless disregard for safety, consistent irresponsibility,
to self-report prior to engaging in the research because there's some noise there. But essentially what they did is they took these people who were, clinically depressed and then these people who were mentally healthy, and they arranged a set of tasks for each of them. And they told them, you want this outcome, and here's how you're going to get that outcome. What they didn't tell the group of students was that they were being sorted into a control group and an actual active group, and that the group that was being tested was going to be put into situations with this program where they couldn't actually control the outcome. So they were told that you do control the outcome, but they actually didn't have control. And what they found is that the depressed people always could determine when they were not in control. They reliably, accurately determined when they were not in control of the situation. But the people who were considered mentally healthy and critical, and that benefit measured as being able to accurately determine when you're not actually in control of something. Say, look, no, this situation, we're not in control of this. We're being offered the illusion of control.
It's funny that you say that.
We're putting ourselves to sleep at night because we want to believe that we are in control, but we're not.
It's funny that you say that because I don't really struggle with depression at all. And I definitely feel like there is one thing under the sun that any of us is in control of, and it is simply our response to whatever circumstance.
I don't even think you have control over it.
So if I handed you a glass of water, and I said, you're in control of the glass of water, Dippity, pour it out. You couldn't do that? You couldn't pour the glass of water out? Let's get real.
Serendipity, how much
It's different. I don't want to get in the weeds, but you can be a psychopath and not criminal, and there's like being what you call like a pure psychopath, like factor 1 versus factor 2 psychopathy. Factor 2 is more like somebody with antisocial personality disorder. Factor 1 is it basically they don't have feelings of remorse or empathy or guilt or shame, but what separates them from sociopaths is that they lack what you call emotional empathy. So they can cognitively miss with people. Like if they see somebody, they can say, "Oh, that must suck for that guy," but they don't feel it. In other words, they would say that one of the things that will be very off about these children at a young age is they will end up if they don't flinch when they see other children, fall her guts out everywhere and go back to work like nothing happened. It doesn't emotionally affect them. But yeah, that's where they're different. But they can be law-abiding people despite lacking that capability. Their brains literally don't allow it. But what's different about them also is they have a much higher stress tolerance threshold than other people. So for the ones that's sincerely criminal, but they can be put in very situations, and they can think in a very level-headed way, not get stressed out like a normal person, and but they can also at the same time, just because they don't have empathy doesn't mean they're not high achievers, and they're not very. There have been studies that show, like, for example, the decisions basically based less off of emotion than like a normal person. Like they're willing to do what it takes. And
kind of a superpower. One of my brothers is like that, and I mean, he fully admits that he has psychopathic tendencies or whatever. And like my sister-in-law, when he said that, she was like, "What the fuck am I married?" It's actually really funny, but he's like actually a great person though. I mean, he loves us. He just only loves his immediate family. He doesn't really feel anything for other people. And he's like you just described. He's like just very. He doesn't give a shit what other people say. It's like kind of a superpower. Like, it doesn't affect him at all.
Well, they can have strong attachments, but they don't require. They don't have the level of empathy or emotional connection with people that. Like it's they're hyper emotional and hyper reactive to everything, especially when it comes to intimate relationships. And that's
Yeah, well, with surgeons in general or doctors in general, if there was a thing on the news, oh, this serial killer, kidnapped this person and then completely chopped their body up into little pieces, that person would go to jail. Well, surgeons in medical school are given, like some medical schools, they're each given a cadaver and then they dissect that cadaver completely so that they can learn all of the structure of the human body. They're both doing the same thing for different reasons.
but that's super violent, and then he ends up putting his gloves in. He's feeling around the heart. He sees the bullet. He sees where the hole is. I don't think he even took the bullet out, which I don't think they're supposed to even. Then he ends up just stitching him, which, you know. But it was just like, wow, that is like such a gnarly looking job when you see it.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah, but see, that's where medical ethics come in and do no harm. The surgeon or doctor can justify it as, yeah, I'm doing all of this stuff, but I'm doing it in service of this has the potential to save this man's life. So that's how they rationalize it in their minds.
But there's nothing morally bad. Why would they even have to rationalize it? Nothing they're doing is wrong.
No, what? Under the premise of, if I don't do it, he's going to die. So he can justify cranking it open and all of that. I mean, there was an episode of ER where they're doing exactly that. This was years ago. I guess I was traumatized by it. But yeah, I mean that's the difference. That's why medical ethics are very important, because if you don't follow that, you get something like.
I actually got to meet my aunt's cadaver. That was pretty trippy. She snuck us into the cadaver room at night and showed me her cadaver.
Who did?
My aunt, she went to University of Miami med school, and I went to visit her. She brought me in to see her cadaver at night.
Like how, like when you go from like putrefaction to skeletonization, it can just hitting those milestones be within just over a week, but it depends on like how humid and how warm it is.
It was like rubbery. It felt like rubber.
Yeah, I think they do. They preserve the body. So whatever a mortician does, that they drain the fluids, etc. They put some fluid in to preserve, that. Not that I know.
I've never smelled like a decomposing body, but like the putrefaction process is where your basically your organs. I forget what exactly happens, but basically your organs start your intestines first, like they all start melting. They get eaten away, and then you end up all of this shit's gonna come out of your body. Other time that those chemicals are present in human beings is in cases of bacterial vaginosis.
You're talking about so that's the stages of decomposition, and they preserve the corpses with formaldehyde. So lovely smell. I remember from school. Oh God, that is actually a really gross smell. But yeah, formaldehyde, and that's where you can. It's preserved to the point where you can actually cut in and see. And there are some interesting people who go to the medical field. Some of them, it's really kind of like interesting. Like for me, it's a lot of interest. Some of them, yeah, I would be a little bit wary. I wouldn't want them to try to do surgery on me. Like I do meet surgeons, and I'm like, all right. one, yeah, because it's literally let's say they're doing a heart transplant. Okay, they're literally playing God. They're saving this person who's dying and they're giving them a life back with a new heart. That can definitely appeal to some people's personality disorders. So it's a really interesting field. But yeah, this.
But I don't know. I don't think that's necessarily the case, though. Even people, first of all, sociopaths are not the ones that are overrepresented as physicians. Mainly the sociopaths, like I said, the factor one psychopathy is different. Sociopaths, they're marked by impulsivity, irresponsibility. Basically, they have very poor control and cannot control themselves. Whereas, like, factor one situation which can be very disciplined and very, goal oriented. It just doesn't have emotional empathy.
That's the ones that
But
have.
people with psychopathy don't get off on hurting people or violence. They can only be dangerous because they don't have maybe the emotional. If you don't feel guilt or remorse or like emotional empathy for what somebody else is experiencing, obviously you're naturally less. You're more willing to use violence if it comes to that.
Well, a pure psychopath is mimicking expressions. So yes, if there was any empathy, it would be mimicking empathy, basically mimicked as the empathy that they see other people, but there would be no feeling. So they could go in and tell someone, we're sorry, we have to do a heart transplant. It's going to be difficult, it's dangerous, yada yada yada. They can sound kind of like, we'll take good care, yada yada. And then but psychopath, I mean, they do pretend because if you meet a psychopath who is not pretending, they're creepy as
Well, no, I know psychopaths have to admit they generally are bewilderment when they see people make facial expressions. They usually one of the things they have to do to kind of they have to basically ask why is that person making that face? They don't get it and they have to rehearse it. But
and there are some that's kind of where some of the torture comes in, where sometimes some of the serial killers will have a torture aspect, and some of that is, like, oh, I'm looking at like your expressions and kind of analyzing this response to this pain that they don't feel, and that's where you get the really creepy.
I could have sworn that with sadism, sexual sadism. They don't want to do illegal things and they only want to do it within the when it comes to consensual sexual activities, but they actually get off on it
Yes,
big time. But that's more
yes.
I don't think that you don't necessarily have to be psychopathic to do that.
No, and there are definitely serial killers who are actually not psychopaths. Some of them have some other personality disorders, but some of them also have kind of been shaped also by their childhood. Some of them have also childhoods that, if you look at, they're extremely fucked up, they've been abused. That's no reason for them to do what they're doing, but it does make it, there's hard to have empathy if they've never been shown empathy. So it's a very interesting. That was an awesome conversation that I think is, and I remember if you
No, you just said check.
Well, there's a psychopathic checklists that actually are very much used by like FBI, CIA. And there's definitely several different comprehensive checklists, and there's people that I've seen, for example, running in political office, and yes, the glib, the super fag official, kind of cheeriness and charm, superficial charm, the popularism, the cult of personality, huge one.
Yeah, I don't think that Trump is necessarily a psychopath, but
No, I think you can have the out. Not a psychopath.
he's a narcissist. But a lot of those, but that's the other thing, though. The super
about compulsive disorders, which I think are also rather fascinating.
which ones?
Compulsive disorders.
Does that mean like
OCD.
because it's like Ukraine getting like and the Europeans didn't stop their bombs and then they didn't.
Yeah, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
Terrible. And then they didn't. Wait.
Oh my God, you're really.
Oh my God.
No, I'm just. Oh my God.
Which they fall under the cluster C.
Go back.
Well, he's talking about, so there's obsessive compulsive personality disorder, then you have OCD, which is different, and the symptoms of the two disorders are different.
Yeah.
And ADHD does that make you retarded, man?
People with OCD that the behaviors and the compulsions aren't necessarily always distressing.
I was just gonna say,
Focus.
but Meg, there's a bunch of us on this stage, or several of us that
Yeah.
have OCD.
Yeah.
And so, like, trust me, I know we've talked about it before. We're well aware.
Yeah. Oh no, just as someone who's actually tried a lot of medications, therapies, it actually is something I am qualified to do, but I'm sort of putting it off because it is known for having a lot of memory loss. But it is Murray surgery, so they will actually put a
Is
gamma
it not
ray.
ECT?
No, I am talking about gamma ray racing. I am talking about gamma rays, and that actually has been the one way of basically curing OCD, significant memory loss, and sometimes some brain damage. So that's why I'm taking it off.
say it's like, I don't know how there was like only one person I worked with that had it severe enough that it was an SMI system. So obviously it's like, it depends on what, so obviously it's on a spectrum and everybody's symptoms are a little bit different and it's not as severe as, some people have OCD and don't even need medication or anything.
No, that's right. And I mean, for some people, it's actually, it can be very handy. Like, you kind of do want a surgeon to have maybe a little bit of OCD because they're probably not going to leave anything in you, like a piece of cloth or something. Like, they're going to be like checking. You want, like, people who do airplane maintenance and pilots probably have a little bit of OCD because they're going to check that flight log and they're going to go back and check it again and again. So,
but OCD doesn't always present that way.
yeah, no, you could definitely, it sounds like ours are definitely different. So, certainly, what kind of are some of the symptoms you have?
A lot of my obsessions are they're ruminations. I'm a ruminator. And the compulsions like placate, that the ruminations aren't actually legit, with certain placating behaviors. But like I tend to I get like obsessed with my hobbies, things that I become interested in. I'm not one of those people who's like, oh, well, here, I'll get the starter kit and see if I even like it first. I'm one of those people that will go and literally spend thousands of dollars to have all of the things, watch all of the videos, pay for all of the education, before I even know if I like it. Like, tends to be. Now, Diogenes.
Are we still talking about personality disorders?
Mental health, yes.
All right. Do we believe that animals reach equilibrium in their ecosystems? We know about that, right? If you leave the ecosystem alone, in order to adapt to the carrying capacity of that ecosystem. What is mental health? It's just a natural manifestation of a species trying to find an equilibrium with the carrying.
I think there are a lot of aspects of mental health that are probably that way.
Nitrogen.
Not all, though.
Maybe is, we need mentally ill people to get us outside of Plato's cave.
I think it can apply to a lot of them. And I think that for a lot of people, like you said, people who don't process things the way that, normies do. I'm a total normie, okay? I'm a total normie. I am the most basic bitch you will ever meet, okay?
Almighty. Heavens above.
Yep. I wear it proudly.
But go yourself, girl. All right.
Hey, Diogenes.
Yeah, Alan.
I was going to say, before you left the room. I think that study you brought up, what it actually shows is how people who are depressed and people who are not depressed react when that lie, not necessarily whether or not they are any more aware of if they're in control. Because everyone goes into that assuming they're being told the truth about what was going on.
Yeah, Alan, you're wrong. It's because you can't know the mental state, and I allowed for that in my recitation summary of the research, which is that you'll never be able to know, unless you do an MRI, I guess, a really rigid MRI, which just like with hormone therapy, you need to establish a baseline for the fMRIs, and then you need to have several interventions for each participant. No one's gonna put that kind of need.
That's why he's in the matrix.
Is that a look at God moment?
Yeah. I don't know if he's still there. Yeah, I understand what he's saying, but if you're starting off a study with deception, then it's hard always to judge what the results mean.
Yeah, that's true. But that's where you have to be like, you have to use that scientific process, right?
Can you hear me? Hello?
You're not back completely.
Al, hear me?
Yeah, I don't know. I just want that's a huge topic. I mean, like neuroscience and psychology all together. That their PhDs and MDs and that. So, anyways, what I wanted to say was all this talk about mental health is making me go to the gym.
Smart man. That's not the best thing you can do.
The best way I know is to get your blood flowing to your brain and then put your brain in the books, put your mind in the books. You know what I mean? Like read something, learn something. That's all I got. I'm one of those.
Help with my OCD.
I'm one of those wannabe health guys.
Am I in the matrix now? Can you hear me? Testing, 1, 2, 3.
I think you're probably
I'm going to come over there, and I'm going to teach you what they're going to do about abstracts. You're going to listen to me, and you're going to enjoy it.
I don't know. Can you keep it under? Oh, Monica, did you do that? I was just.
I appreciate you sharing
On the stage, that was very rude, but I'm going to look past that because I'm
Did you mute him?
music.
I did. He's in
Why am I being muted?
She wanted Abaya to finish. Wait. She wanted Abaya to finish statement. Abaya, please finish, and then Diogenes, you get 2 minutes.
Yeah, thanks. No, everyone has their limits, and I just want to say thank you for serendipity for stating yours. Because here's the thing, I'm assuming you're not a therapist, first of all, or even if you were.
I am not.
So yeah, so thank you. So the thing is, like, everyone has their limits. Everyone has to remain functional. Everyone has responsibilities. So it's not that I don't want to hear a friend, cry or complain about their life. That's fine. That's what friends are for. But sometimes I don't have the capacity to do that, and I have to put hard limits for my life. So for me, I want I got a new job. I don't want them to complain about stuff. Like, that's not what I'm there for. Like, you know, like, that's not what I want my friendship to be for. You know what I mean? Like, they can do that once in a while, but not always.
I mean, here's the thing. I want to celebrate my friends' successes for sure. I also want to be a measure of support for my friends that might be going through a struggle. I don't necessarily mind my friends calling and being like, oh my gosh, I have X, Y, or Z going on in my life. But I will very quickly recognize if this is something that is out of my scope of being able to assist. And if that's the case, then I have no problem drawing that boundary. Like, I don't even think I'm equipped to help you figure this out. You know, you probably ought to talk to somebody. Because I want to, I mean, I don't know, for me, my friendships are about supporting during the struggles. 2 minutes, Monica, 2 minutes, and I'm watching. The clock starts now. Go. Or not. Oh, you're in the matrix. You're in the matrix. Wait, I'll give you your minutes.
Like a, I don't know, older sample, there's a certain way of talking and then there's a certain way of writing. Like, if you get your GRE or, you know, study for your GRE, those words are used specifically for management, you know? Or your LSAT, those words are used specifically for legal terms. So, like, there's a manner of speaking, a manner of talking. So, like, one manner of talking and a manner of, like, writing. You know, you write in a formal way, you might talk in a very informal way. But, like, what I'm just trying to say, like, there actually is a way of talking there, or, like, writing there. So, like, some people benefit from it. It's not for everyone. But some people are inclined to talk out of their problems. So, like, that's also, like, that's a form of therapy. And some people are more inclined to listening to music and just not thinking about it, you know? And therefore, not only briefly.
That sucks. Anybody got any cure-alls for headaches?
Ice cream.
That sounds painful.
Yeah, drink lots of water and sweat it out. That's me. But it depends. Like, for example, I had a friend who drank a lot of coffee, and then when she stopped drinking coffee, she had headaches for a year.
Yeah. Hydration generally has a lot to do with headaches.
Yeah, but you don't want to blow out your kidneys. You know, like so that's why like you want to work out a little bit. You want to get the blood flowing. You know, because you want your whole entire organs to saturate with hydration. You know. These headaches, even if it is for like short, like, you know, a few hours, but it actually gets rid of the headaches, and you're in a better state of mind, and you're able to, like, you know, move, like, actually move out of the headache space.
Did you just dismiss the power of hydration?
No,
Don't dismiss the power of hydration. I don't like your lies.
I didn't. I just said the hydration mantra also has a way of soothing a person's headache. Silent person experience, and plus, like, people talk about it.
Did you spend today arguing on Clubhouse, Marshall?
No, I spent most of the day with my head under a pillow.
Did you?
Yeah, which I still have a headache now, but it's not as bad as it was, say, 2 hours ago.
Good. Drink, my friend. All right, we gotta go do this walk, Monica. Monica, are you there? Are you indisposed? Your favorite comedian? Oh, are you starting a poll? Oh. Well, I'm gonna let you have this little poll, my dear. Wait, what? Hold on. Okay, good. Thank you, Monica. All right. Y'all have fun on Let's Clubhouse Streets. I'm going for a walk. I got me a date. I'll talk to y'all later. No, don't be saying nothing. Bertha, you don't be saying shit.
Okay, baby girl.
But you see how I am, my baby girl?
Baby girl, I know.
You see how I am, my baby girl? So why are you calling me baby girl? Start calling names. Because you don't like the name I got for you. You want me to start calling you baby? Don't call me baby girl, bitch. My name is Oops Your Bag, bitch. My name is not
when you write doctor. All right, let me finish. When you write doctor, I'm sorry. Please. Okay, no, I'm ready. I'm ready. So we went down there. We went to I think it's Jenny. Well, we got popular times with the back. What is it? Surviving Baltimore niggas? Is that what we doing? Yeah, they wanted the one. I'm trying to tell a story about when I went down there. Oh, okay, go ahead. Because see, so when I went down there, went to the Jenny, I was too long. Went to the next one. I was too long. So then I said, okay, let's go to Chipotle. Went to Chipotle, and they was $13. He only had $10. And I think I was the last $10 because it was like when I was looking at it, damn, it was like I'm just thinking last $10. Like this probably it went in. Because I'm like, okay, so he didn't go to the hospital. He don't know all that shit. He must got that shit. If he skinny now, he got that shit. He told us he was fat 7 years ago. No, baby. That's Dr. True. That's next point. Dr. True. So we don't put it come from. Oh, I didn't say on your Popeyes, bitch. Shut up. I didn't expose shit. I didn't somebody else got this from the other side. I ain't exposed this bitch. I don't think so. It came from right off the school. I don't remember. Yeah, basically, he was saying you wasn't worth his $10, $13, 11, 12. A lot of people knock it off as conspiracy and stuff like that, but this is happening before your face, and this is why I started off with saying that they want you to believe that it is just conspiracy, and therefore you don't understand exactly what's going on. But majority of people, if you even look at the history of this country, if you even understand that Kennedy, you even understand John F. Kennedy and the statement based on what you would consider conspiracy now. You would call John F. Kennedy a conspiracy, not with the statement that he made about really who was controlling the government. So you can knock it off as it's just conspiracy, but when you really go behind the scenes, you see there's an actual fact.
Wait, who is controlling the government? What do you say?
This isn't ISO comment.
Yeah, he did a speech about secret organizations.
Major Fortune 500 company that makes more money off of less population in the United States. I'll wait.
That's not the point. It's not the point. Corporations is just they run by somebody else. They run by the family organization. They run by the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds. That's who's running. It's not the point of the corporation. It's not me dealing with the corporation. I'm going over the corporation and the plan that they have for America, which they always have. It's not about the corporation.
So every major corporation, from Johnson and Johnson to your major automotive manufacturers to your fast food companies, restaurant industry, hotel industry, everybody makes more money when there's more population. Construction, insurance. There are some people in the lead positions who have talked about population from a world perspective as a problem and something that needed to be fixed. That is true. There are some smart people who have talked about that. But corporations in general want world population down line.
This administration is falling apart. People just quitting left and right. If there are no Republicans in here, man, I bet you there are a lot of people saying they told you so. People don't really want to work for Donald Trump and those kinds of things. I wonder why. He don't have a plan. He don't have a plan for them. He don't have a plan for the United States.
That's the thing. If people think that the United States government just allowed Trump as one man to make all the decisions, and they really don't understand what's going on. America is a corporation. You have a president and you have a vice president. The ones that's over, this is what I'm trying to tell Trent. He keeps focused on the corporations. It's bigger than the corporations. It's the ones that's leading the corporations and telling the corporations what to do. That's over. These are the family members. You mentioned Bill Gates, but there's different family members that's controlling, have been controlling America from day one, right? And that's bigger than the corporations. It's not about the corporations. Who is controlling the corporation? That's why this argument, I don't understand. We just gonna keep bumping heads. We never agree with this argument because you're focused on the corporation, and I'm telling you, it's bigger than the corporation. It's controlling the corporation.
So I don't mind like indulging your theory, but let's just do this. Can we acknowledge that these powers that be, like, they're not infallible, and that hiring Donald Trump is like a clear example of their, I guess, I would say, ineptitude in what he's doing, or do you think that that's by design?
Of course, at one point, yes, men have disagreements. Of course, men, Donald Trump is a good talker, but then at the end of the day, they may see that yes, he might have been the wrong decision. Here's where you come in with assassination. People will talk about conspiracy theories. So when people don't do what they want them to do, then you have the assassination thing that comes into play. So yeah, definitely, they disagree. Sometimes they make a choice
ways that we could do that?
No, I didn't go into policy.
Okay. Can you think of some maybe positive policies that would get at what you're talking about?
You can have policies that encourage family growth to stop at your children. That's one policy.
Which one? What the policy look like?
I don't know. Like I said again, I don't get into the policy part of it. There's a lot of different theories on that. And
There's a written policy, brother. Help me out.
Yeah, hold on. Here's why I asked. It just seems sort of a little grotesque. Contraception, available contraception, and those things. At least think about or talk about, policies that might be used that allow for people that we know over time, like reduce the number of children, but give people autonomy, right? Rather than just sort of say we need to reduce the population, because what we know, and when people ask you, they've asked you what sort of the implications and who this sort of saying things like that and sort of leaving it open ended, who historically have paid the brunt for those things. It's often been people and the things that we hate to say, like the global South. I know there's don't like that word. It's poor communities. It's non-white, non-European communities. And not be interested in also having a conversation of how we might do so responsibly and give people autonomy. That's just weird that you keep talking about that. And for someone who talks about everything, you don't seem to have interest in that.
So the reason why I don't go into it is the same reason. It's kind of the same reason. Most people aren't well versed on the issues. There are different countries, different parts of the world where, to your point, there are places in Africa, there are places in South America that would need different policies than a place like the United States or Europe. And it's not about shrinking. When you say shrinking population, I'm not talking about shrinking. See, it makes it sound like you're talking about killing people in mass. That is not what I'm talking about. But the global fertility rate, so that we don't overrun our resources, is something that's responsible. Because right now we are in an exponential growth period, and when you have too many people born at one time, you end up with bad results like wars over resources and some of the things that we're seeing happen right now.
When you talking about war, look, do you think the wars over resources are built out of this or caused out of necessity or greed?
I can tell you.
Okay, so you couldn't use the argument to lower the population.
Let me see this concrete. Depends on how you look at that. On one hand, I call it greed, but if gas was $10 a gallon, a lot of us would call it a necessity to get it down. You know what I mean? So it depends on how you look at it.
So now you're just trying to straddle the fence and have it both ways. to the point of destitute, such that you are now stealing, then that's still not a resource issue. That's a squandering of resource issue. And it still goes back to greed.
Don't try to sound smart real quick.
Listen, if it's too much for you, brother, just tap out. Man.
No, you're my boy.
If it's too much. So what part didn't you understand? The squander part?
I don't
The
know.
resource part? The scarcity part? Which one really fucked you up?
All of it. All of it. Hey, plainly. Look, here's what I'll say. The United States has been involved in
You're just being dishonest, bro. Just relax. You don't have to defend. You don't have to defend. You don't have to defend.
Concrete, I'm actually probably agreeing with you.
Okay, then agree and don't try to like play it both ways.
I don't even know what you're talking about.
As an alternative explanation.
And what I'm
And you said greed, and now you're trying to fucking backtrack and have it both ways by saying greed and resource scarcity.
I don't know. Let me just. There's nuance to the conversation, my brother. So when we were having the 1973 oil embargo, right, and you could only fill your car every other day for a period.
And do you think that was due to scarcity?
That was due. Well, it was due to scarcity at the.
That was a retaliation to events that were happening between, I think it was Israel, Egypt, in America, right? So it had nothing to do with scarcity.
Okay, but so here, I'm gonna probably agree.
So why are you bullshitting, bro? Just like let it go.
Hold on. Look, the 1991 war. $10 a gallon. Some of us would call that it's because of scarcity. And it just depends on how you look at it on which side.
So now you're just appealing to like some other person's attitude towards it, who might be like less informed. Like, come on, Trey, you don't gotta bullshit, bro.
Yeah, I'm talking about drill, baby, drill.
I'm talking about you, brother.
Know exactly how to work
Touch the unwashed masses. You right here. Alright, so you got it.
So you can feel all this happening. Your breathing is happening. Your thinking is happening. Your feeling is happening. Your hearing, your seeing. The clouds are happening across the sky. The sky is happening blue. The sun is happening shining. There it is. All this happening. And may I introduce you? This is yourself. This begins. Affairs. You should realize They try to control the art. A lot of yoga teachers try to get you to control your own mind, mainly to prove to you that you can't do it. There's nothing, a fool who persists in his folly will become wise. So what they do is they speed up the folly. And so you get concentrating. And you can have a certain amount of superficial and initial success by a process commonly called self-hypnosis. And a good teacher will let you go along that way for a while until he really throws you with one. Why are you concentrating? See, Buddhism works this way. Buddha said, if you suffer because you desire, and your desires are either unattainable or always being disappointed or something. So cut out desire. So those disciples went away and they stamped on desire, jumped on desire, cut the throat of desire, and threw out desire. But then they came back and Buddha said, but you're still desiring not to desire. They wanted to get rid of that. So when you see that that's nonsense, there naturally comes over you a quietness. It's seeing that you cannot control your mind. You realize there is no control. What you took to be the thinking strain is just one of the thinkings. What you took to be the experiencer of experience is just a part of the experience. So there isn't any thinker of thoughts, feeler of feelings. We get into that bind because we have a grammatical rule that verbs have to have subjects. Now, the funny thing about that is that verbs are processes and subjects are nouns, which are supposed to be things. How does a noun start a verb? Does a thing put a process into action? Obviously it can't. But we always insist that there is this subject called the knower. And without a knower, there can't be knowing. Well, that's the rule of nature. In nature, there's no knowing. Like you're feeling it. And I would say you are feeling as if you were somehow different from the feeling. When I say feeling, what I mean is there is feeling here. When I say you are feeling, I mean there is feeling there. Well, that countless of language for you. Chinese is easier. You don't have to put all that in. Or you can say things twice as fast in Chinese as you can in any other language. Well, anyway, when you come to see that you can do nothing, that the play of thought, of feeling, etc. just goes on by itself as a happening, then you are in a state which we will call meditation. And slowly, without being pushed, your thoughts will come to silence. That is to say, all the verbal, symbolic chatter going on in the skull, don't try and get rid of it, because that will again produce the illusion that there's a controller. It goes on, it goes on, it goes on, and finally it gets tired of itself and bored and stops. And so then there's a silence. The world as it is. And you don't see any past. And you don't see any future. You don't see any difference between yourself and the rest of it. That's just an idea. You can't put your hand on the difference between myself and you. You can't blow it, you can't bounce it, you can't pull it. It's just an idea. You can't find any material body, because material body is an idea. So is spiritual body. that the transformation of human consciousness through meditation is frustrated. So long as we think of it in terms of something that I myself can bring about by some kind of way, by some sort of gimmick. Because you see, that leads to endless games of spiritual one-upmanship and of guru competitions. Of my guru is more effective than your guru. My yogas are faster than your yoga. I'm more aware of myself than you are. I'm humbler than you are. I'm sorry for my sins than you are. I love you more than you love me. And this interminable goings on about which people fight and wonder whether they're a little bit more involved than somebody else and so on. But that you are this universe, and you are creating it at every moment, because you see, it starts now. It didn't begin in the past. There was no past. See, if the universe began in the past, when that happened, it was now. See, but it's still now. And the universe is still beginning now, and it's trailing off like the wake of a ship from now. In that wake, if the ship fades out, so does the past. You can look back there to explain things, but the explanation disappears. You'll never find it. And things are not explained by the past. They're explained by what happens now. That creates the past. And it begins here. That's the birth of responsibility. Because otherwise, you can always look over your shoulder and say, well, I'm the way I am because my mother dropped me. And she dropped me because she was neurotic because her mother dropped her. Way we go back to Adam and Eve, or and if you know, you see that I, in the sense of the person, the front, the ego, really doesn't exist, then it won't go to your head too badly if you wake up and discover that you're gone.
This audio program is presented by Audible.com. Audible, audio that speaks to you wherever you are.
It's feeling is happening. You're hearing, you're seeing. The clouds are happening across the sky. The sky is happening blue. The sun is happening shining. There it is. All this happening. And may I introduce you? This is yourself. This begins to be a vision of who you really are. And that's the way you function. You function by happening, that is to say, by spontaneous. I cannot possibly preach it to you, because the minute you start thinking, I should understand that, this is the stupid notion again that I should bring it about, when there is no you to bring it about. See, that's why I'm not preaching. You can only preach to egos. All I can do is to talk about what is. I love it, and therefore I like to talk. If I get paid for it, then I make my living. sensible people get paid for doing what they enjoy doing. So this is not you see, this is the whole approach here, is to convert you, not to make you over, not to improve you, but for you to discover that if you really knew the way you are, things would be sane. But you see, you can't do that. You can't make that discovery because you're in your own way. So long as you think so long as that hallucination blocks it, and the hallucination disappears only in the realization of its own futility. When at last you see you can't do it, you cannot make yourself over, you cannot really control your own mind. Stamped on desire, jumped on desire, cut the throat of desire, and threw out desire. But then they came back and Buddha said, but you're still desiring not to desire. They wanted not to get rid of that. So when you see that that's nonsense, there naturally comes over you a quietness. It's seeing that you cannot control your mind. You realize there is no control. What you took to be the thinker of thoughts is just one of the thoughts. What you took to be the feeler of the feelings, which was that muscular strain, is just one of the feelings. What you took to be the experiencer of experience is just a part of the experience. So there isn't any thinker of thoughts, feeler of feelings. We get into that bind because we have a grammatical rule that verbs have to have Well, anyway, when you come to see that you can do nothing, that the play of thought, of feeling, etc. just goes on by itself, then you are in a state which we will call meditation. And slowly, without being pushed, your thoughts will come to silence. That is to say, all the verbal, symbolic chatter going on in the skull, don't try and get rid of it, because that will again produce the illusion that there's a controller. And in a material body, because material body is an idea, so is spiritual body. Somebody's philosophical notions. See, reality isn't material. theologically. Old Testament biblical theology behind him. If he'd had Hindu theology, he could have put it more subtly. But it was under that rather primitive theology of the Old Testament. And that was a conception of God as a monarchical boss. And you can't go around and say, I'm the boss's son. Say, I'm God. You must allow it for everyone else too. But this was a heretical idea from the point of view of Hebrew theology. So what they did with Jesus was they pedestalized him. That means kicked him upstairs so that he wouldn't be able to influence anyone else. And only and that stopped the gospel cold right at the beginning. It couldn't spread. Well, anyway. Meditation. By some kind of wangle, by some sort of gimmick. Because you see, that leads to endless games of spiritual one-upmanship and of guru competitions. Of my guru is more effective than your guru. My yoga's faster than your yoga. I'm more aware of myself than you are. I'm humbler than you are. I'm sorry for my sins than you are. I love you more than you love me. And this interminable goings on about which people fight and wonder whether they're a little bit more evolved than somebody else and so on. All that can just fall away. And then was no past. See, if the universe began in the past, when that happened, it was now. See, but it's still now. And the universe is still beginning now, and it's trailing off like the wake of a ship from now. If the ship fades out, so does the past. You can look back there to explain things, but the explanation disappears. You'll never find it there. Things are not explained by the past. They're explained by what creates the past. And it begins here. That's the birth of responsibility. Because otherwise, you can always look over your shoulder and say, well, I'm the way I am because my mother dropped me. And she dropped me because she was neurotic because her mother dropped her. Where do you go back to Adam and Eve or to a disappearing monkey or something? We never get at it. But in this way, you're doing all this.
This audio program is presented by Audible.com. Audible, audio that speaks to you wherever you are. This audio program is presented by Audible.com. Audible, audio that speaks to you wherever you are.
in silence. Because I work on the principle of a physician rather than a clergyman. A physician is always trying to get rid of his patients and send them away healthy to stand on their own feet. Whereas a clergyman is trying to get them as members of a religious organization so that they will continue to pay their pledges, pay off the mortgage on an expensive building, and generally belong to the church, lose its membership, and thereby prove by sheer weight of numbers the veracity of its tenets. My objective is really to get rid of you, so that you won't need me or any other teacher. I'm afraid some of my colleagues would not approve of that attitude, because it is widely believed and said that in order to advance the spiritual life, whatever that is, it is that saying that meets the ear. Because if you really are sincerely concerned with yourself and are in such confusion that you feel you have to go to a psychiatrist to talk over your state, then of course you need to go. Likewise, if you are in need of someone to tell you what to do, to practice meditation, or to attain a state of liberation, nirvana or moksha, whatever it may be called, you feel that necessity very strongly, then you must do it. Because, as the poet William Blake said, the fool who persists in his folly will become wise. However, I do want to point this out. What is the source of a guru's authority? He can tell you that he can speak from experience, that he has experienced states of consciousness the Roman Catholic Church. And the Roman Catholic following very often says that the individual mystical experience is not to be trusted because of its faculty to be interpreted in a purely personal way, and that it has to be guarded against acceptance by the substantial and objective traditions of the Church. But those traditions are held to be substantial and objective only because those who follow believe it to be so. They say so. And if you follow it, you say so. So the question comes back to you. Why do you believe? Why do you form this opinion? Upon what basis does all this rest? Well, of course, almost everybody is looking for help. Because when I was younger, so much in an unpredictable way, external world of happenings. And this world of happenings includes enormous amount of suffering, tragedy, you feel in this moment that an increase in income would solve your problems, and you've got an increase in income, this would give you a pleasant feeling for a few weeks. But then, as you well know, if that's ever happened to you, the feeling wears off, and you may start worrying about paying your debts, and start worrying about whether you will get sick. There is always something to worry about. And if you're very rich indeed, you've still got the sickness of death, and also anxieties about revolution, about whether the Internal Revenue Service will take it all away from you, or catch you for cheating on your taxes, or put you in prison for no good reason. Now, there is always this worry. And so you realize that the problem of life does not really consist but unfortunately, it doesn't always work because you have a nagging suspicion in the back of your mind that you're simply hypnotizing yourself, listening in the dark. What the Germans call Hintergedanke, which is a thought that's sealed way, way back behind your intellect, but it has a gnawing persistence. What if? And so you realize that this matter of controlling the mind is no superficial undertaking, because although you may be able to smooth the ruffles of your consciousness, there is beneath that a vast area of unconsciousness which erupts as unpredictably as events in the external world. And so you consider seriously the possibilities of psychoanalysis, to go down and get into those depths and see if oil can be put on those troubled waters. And then, of course, you get into the guru business. destruction of the ecology. It ghastly fulfillment of the biblical prophecy that every valley should be exalted, and every mountain made low, and the rough places made plain. And I'm sorry to say, it was hasted by Sarah, who was given the anyway. Way that God the same Isaiah also said. Something that at least Christians do not often find out they become brats. Imagine for a moment that it was your privilege to have a brief interview with God. In the course of which you're allowed to ask one question. What would you ask? Now, you would have to think this over very carefully because this golden opportunity will come to you only once. And you would have to be most careful that you didn't ask a silly question. Well, you might try God out with a Zen Buddhist card. Such as, beyond the positive and the negative, what is reality? And the Lord would turn to you and say, my dear child, your question has no meaning. And you wouldn't have the opportunity to think up a meaningful one and come back. So perhaps you should have asked, what question should I ask? Feel that something is wrong if you don't have a problem. Well, you've got one. That is, the insoluble problem of trying to win without losing. Now, as long as you can keep that problem, you'll be busy. Only, however, until you see it come in such a way that you cannot see that it's meaningless. Now, the better gurus are very clever at bringing these ways out. You may see, for example, if you are invited to practice intense concentration, that after a while you find yourself thinking about concentrating, and therefore that your concentration is somewhat divided. He says, now you've actually made progress, because finding out that you could not really concentrate was valuable because it began to break the illusion of your ego. But you've only got your foot in at the door. Beyond this are many, many higher things to be done, and you must redouble your efforts. And so, of course, you apply yourself all the more again and again on all sorts of tricks that these old gentlemen can come out with. And you will keep at it just as long as he can make you fall for it. But in the end, you see that it was all tricks. As the great Zen master Rinzai said, well, Zen is like deceiving a child